it's like that.
We are live. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's 6:05. I appreciate everyone who's joined us here tonight. Welcome to the chambers of Cayuga County Legislature. And at this point, I'm going to pass it off to our clerk for a roll call.
Tucker Whitman. Tucker Whitman.
Here.
Andy Dennison.
Here.
Ben Vitale.
Here.
Chris Petrus.
Present.
Paul Pinckney.
Here.
Keith Batman.
Here.
Hans Putcher. Hans Putcher. Charlie Ripley.
Present.
Heidi Nightingale.
Present.
Elaine Daly.
Here.
Tricia Kerr.
Here.
Timothy Lattimore.
Here.
Michael Didio.
Here.
Ryan Foley.
Present.
Aileen McNabb Coleman.
Present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I think our microphones are off.
They are off. Chris said it would backbeat.
They are, because the speakers will feed back into the 8x8 and it'll create some feedback.
At this time, we have a specific order of business for Health and Human Services resolution. We're going to do that first before we enter into the public to be heard. So if I could have Elaine Daly offer that resolution.
Yes, I'd like to offer the resolution on the agenda tonight. This came about, started on Friday, and I did send the draft out yesterday with some background. And basically, if this resolution passes tonight, it would authorize the health department to bring on up to 7 registered professional nurses to be brought on in a part-time and actually temporary capacity, specific to meet the obligations of the department to work on our COVID-related work. These individuals would be brought in and paid on an hourly basis, primarily responsible for our COVID testing clinics and being trained for contact tracing. And there was an initial thought that perhaps we could send these registered nurses to a nursing agency and contract with that agency for that service, but that didn't materialize. So in order to get these staff on payroll and to use them for this purpose, then we're asking to create these 7 registered professional nurses. There is, as explained by Kathleen Cuddy, targeted money in their preparedness grant from the state that can only be spent on COVID-related expenses. And as you see in the resolution, that money will be tracked and no further expenditure will be made or unless she comes back and gets further authorization. So with that, I'm asking for a motion to allow the health department to create and fill up to 7 part-time registered nurses to assist in the COVID-related work.
Whitman will move it.
Okay, discussion on this resolution. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Legislator Daly. Okay, at this point of our meeting, we're going to enter into the public to be heard phase. I'm going to be calling on, actually, I'm going to use that sheet. See if I can find it. Thank you. I'm going to also access the sign-in sheet, but I'm also going to call on legislators who have asked to be called on who have invited speakers themselves. Please approach the podium here if you would state your name and your address, and we have a policy of a 3-minute time frame in order to relay your message. Thank you so much. And we ask that you do your very best to observe that. Our deputy clerk will be keeping track of the time for us. So at this time, I'd like to call on Legislator Nightingale.
Thank you. Before I call my guest to speak to be heard, I have a statement myself that I'd like to read to the community and my legislative colleagues. As the first-time legislator of District 10, representing the northwest quadrant of the city of Auburn, as well as all of Cayuga County as a whole, I am denouncing the published words of my legislative colleague, Andrew Dennison. His words clearly identify his lack of critical thinking, ability to research or understand research validity, and his ability to lead effectively as becoming of the heavily responsible position of an elected official. Particularly concerning to me in Legislator Dennison's letter and follow-up interview in the Citizens newspaper is the clear indication of his implicit bias of people of color while stating he's not a racist. While this body cannot legally censure or remove Legislator Dennison, we do have a legal mechanism to remove him as chair of the Judicial and Public Safety Committee. I call upon my colleagues to complete that action. While words and public statements from me and others are important, actions are the true basis for forward movement around social justice issues. Even if I stand alone in calling for his removal from this chairmanship, I call upon this action as it is my duty, the duty I took on January 7th when I took my oath of office. Further, I propose this to the legislature. Develop, implement, promote, and enforce anti-racism strategies, policies, procedures within the entirety of this municipal organization. Examine equity as a systemic and structural level, such as auditing different aspects of the municipality's operations, planning, policy and program development, and procedures and practices with respect to employment, service delivery, and contracting, as well as organizational culture, while taking steps to eliminate barriers in a way that ensures measures of progress. And finally, educate and sensitize elected officials and civil servants on mutual respect, citizenship, and the obligation to protect and promote human rights and social justice at all levels, but particularly for our tax-paying citizens of color. So at this time, my first guest to be heard is Mr. Lucian Lombardo.
My name is Lucian Lombardo, and can you hear me? And I live at 61 Pine Street in Auburn. I'm here speaking to you because the words of one member of this legislature are trying to undo, or at least make more difficult, the work of making Cayuga County and Auburn a fairer, more peaceful place for all of its citizens, to grow, love, live, and work. Now, how can mere words do that? They do it by reinforcing prejudice, pandering to historical stereotypes and images, humiliating groups of people, attempting to prevent the empowerment of marginalized people, appealing to a past that never was, and ignoring the reality of that past and its manifestations in the present. Also pitting groups of people against one another, not supporting but violating Black and brown people's inherent human dignity. Such words as were written by Mr. Dennison add to the social toxicity of the world that we all, and particularly this legislature, if those words represent that, add to the social toxicity of the world we as adults in our community create for our children. I returned to Auburn in Cayuga County 7 years ago when I retired after nearly 40 years in Virginia. Before I went to Virginia, I worked as a teacher in Auburn Correctional Facility in the late 1960s and early 1970s. and of all places in prison, I learned the importance of working hard to understand people in circumstances that were different from mine. I was a young white person from a small town in central New York, and my students were primarily Black and Hispanic and young, middle-aged from New York's inner cities, or as we called them back then, ghettos. If I were going to be an effective teacher, I needed to understand the world from which my students came. Central to my learning was the importance of respecting the experience of the men I taught, not calling them names, not resorting to stereotypes, not believing the stereotypes, as a means of understanding their complaints, trying to find ways of empowering them in an institution, in a world so often structured to disempower and humiliate them because of their race and ethnicity. From my perspective, this meant supporting, not violating their human dignity. This meant using my privilege and power to help empower them with what I could teach and how I related to them as people. When I returned to Auburn after 40 years, I was amazed to attend a symposium on Harriet Tubman that was held at the community college. I saw the diverse programming at the Auburn Public Theater. I got involved with the Celebrate Diverse Auburn, the Harriet Tubman Center for Justice and Peace, the Southern Cayuga Anne Frank Tree Project, and provided programs for the Cayuga County Museum. I saw that Auburn and Cayuga County were proactively working to educate themselves, to recognize and build support for human dignity of all citizens, regardless of color, ethnicity, sexual orientation, economic position.
Your 2 minutes are up, Mr. Lombardo.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Lombardo.
I would now like to invite Mr. Brian Muldrow.
While Mr. Muldrow makes his way to the podium, I just want to remind the legislature and the public, during this public to be heard, we offer the time for the public to speak, and we cannot ask questions or get into discussion in case anyone is unfamiliar with that process. Thank you.
So I come to you, Brian Muldrow, live here in town, Madison Ave. So I come to you unscripted because I didn't prepare you. So I'll just tell you how those comments made me and many people like me feel. So as this gentleman made these statements, what was alarming to me was he failed to see the progress he had in his own town, his own community. Auburn was nationally recognized for having peaceful protests. And did it dawn on him that we're not indicative, there's probably other people protests that were happening as well. And he ignored that. He spewed the hate that makes us feel as if there's got to be more conversation with the right people. And it also made me look at my legislative body and want to hold them accountable for his actions, because your silence is strong. So if you're not opposing his comments, then basically I believe that you believe in those comments. And all this work and all these talks we've had with the city and the mayor and the police department and the sheriff who gave them their time to try to learn and develop would be a waste to have our legislative body making comments like that. And that's how I felt. The other part of it made me research who I was talking about. Like this gentleman, I researched him, and this is, if he's willing to say this being a political format, he's willing to say, what is he saying behind closed doors? And I think many of you that know him personally know the man he is. This is not like somebody went rogue or spoke that was, that got taken out of context. But if you guys have been on this, these boards and these committees and this legislative body, you work side by side with this man, you know we're not lying. And if you know that, and you're quiet, and you don't ask for more, shame on you. Because not only would you lose my respect, you lost something way more valuable than you lost my vote.
Thank you, Mr. Woodrow.
I would now like to call Ms. Dia Carbajal to speak.
My name is Dia Carvajal. I live at 116 Curtis Place in Auburn, New York. The problem with power is how to achieve its responsible use rather than its irresponsible and indulgent use, of how to get men of power to live for the public rather than live off the public. These are the words of Robert Kennedy, and they fit our moment. It is not a question of whether or not legislator Dennison's remarks were racist. They were. It is not a question of whether his letter was incendiary and hateful. It was. It is not a question of whether or not his penned thoughts were ignorant and misinformed. They were. It is a question of what actions are we going to take to address an irresponsible and indulgent man of power. When an elected officer speaks to any issue, they can never take off their city council hat, or their Board of Education hat, or their assemblyman hat. Their words and actions hold great power and authority. And when they are a member of a legislative body, they speak with the authority of that entire body. When an elected official speaks or writes a letter to the editor without explicitly stating that it is their own opinion, it is assumed that they do speak for the entire legislative body. It's a huge responsibility and one that should never be flaunted, disrespected, or abused. Are the hateful words that Mr. Dennison placed in our local newspaper the words of the entire body? Think about it. Because therein lies Mr. Dennison's transgression, the betrayal of the trust of this legislature and the people of Cayuga County. That is where we need to encourage responsible use of authority and curb the hate that his deliberate words have conjured. Cayuga County is the home and final resting place of Harriet Tubman. Her statue is placed in front of the Equal Rights Heritage Center to guide our way. We are challenged to walk in her light every day. It is an awesome responsibility, and we may fall short. But we cannot simply stand in front of her statue for a photo op. We must strive for social justice in her memory. We must try to stamp out the fires of systemic racism in our country and in our county. We need to address and act in the moment of this letter. I ask that all elected officials in the Cayuga County Legislature undergo diversity training. I ask for the legislature to disavow legislator Dennison's remarks, and I ask for his resignation as he no longer holds the public trust, not here, not in Harriet's hometown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carvajal.
I now would like to invite Ms. Rhoda Overstreet to speak.
Evening, my name is Rhoda Overstreet Wilson, and I am a lifelong resident of Auburn. Thank you for your time this evening. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou. Andrew Dennison's editorial comments were racially tone deaf and divisive in nature. He chose to use his platform as a Cayuga County legislator to become a protagonist for the alt-right sound bites and debunked discriminatory statistical jargon because he could. He was operating within his white privilege. He felt no fear or angst when he so eloquently recited his non-substantiated, cold-laden racist rhetoric, and then went on to defend it with a second letter when it was obviously clear that the citizens of Cayuga County found it to be offensive and demanded action. Ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. James Baldwin. Andrew Dennison has positioned himself through his words and deeds to be an enemy to social justice, and that places my family and all other Black and brown people in Cayuga County in harm's way. Citizens, please hear me. This body here is here to advocate for you, but you all need to know silence is a permission giver. Any real change requires a deep understanding that what we all know to be normal will end. This moment demands leadership that is resolved and has the courage to act when it is not popular, but it is the right thing to do. Cayuga County Legislature, what will be your leadership legacy? Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to invite Nina Wiggett.
Hello, my name is Nina Wickett. My address is 413 Fire Lane 29, Moravian, New York. I will be ceding my time to Heidi's next guest speaker.
Thank you. I then invite Amanda Jane Pelletier.
My name is Amanda Pelletier. I live at 122 Chatham Avenue in Auburn. I am a homeschooling instructor entering my 9th year of teaching. I'm also a coordinator at the Auburn Hunger Task Force Soup Kitchen, where our mission statement is to seek to provide sustenance, community, and dignity to individuals and families suffering from food insecurity in and around the city of Auburn. Protecting human dignity should be a mission for all public servants. It is the duty of each member of the Cayuga County Legislature to ensure that you are protecting human dignity in all forms through utilizing your position and your voice. While I'm talking, Didio is on his phone instead of listening. It is also your personal duty to check your peers when another member of the legislature shows an inadequate sense of empathy for others who seek basic human rights. Andrew Dennison's letter to the citizen was a callous and out-of-touch tirade against the Black Lives Matter movement. He used the phrase black on black violence with an intention to undermine the movement. This is a non-term. It does not exist. Violence against another individual is simply called violence and is dealt with accordingly by our justice system. But Dennison's use of this phrase is intended to turn people of color into a lump conglomerate, a group of others to be feared, hated, and reprimanded. Although he claims not to be racist, this is a racial tactic. I hope that Andrew Dennison will learn from the strong public reaction to his words, and that he will choose to take responsibility for the mistake he has made. I tell my students that everyone makes mistakes. Learning comes from making mistakes, but it's how we react to our own mistakes that shows our character and our flexibility to learn. 2 weeks ago, my 11-year-old son, Patrick, read an article in The Citizen to which he had a passionate response. He drafted a letter to the editor, which included some excellent points, but in his emotional state and being 11, he used the term stupid when referring to a certain group restricting the rights of another. Well, we read over his first draft together. We discussed the importance of clarifying our words through expressive vocabulary and strong writing skills
without resorting to name calling. I wish Mr. Dennison had been present for that lesson. Mr. Dennison's final draft to the citizen was full of exclamation points, structured as an unprofessional rant, and repeatedly called protesters and supporters of the movement idiots. Mr. Dennison is not 11 years old, and I expect more from my legislators than from my own students. The immaturity, insensitivity, and unprofessionalism of this letter was all the more startling and disappointing. Nina yielded to me, so I have the immaturity, insensitivity, and unprofessionalism of this letter was all the more startling and disappointing when concluded with the following postscript. Andrew Dennison is the Cayuga County Legislator Representative for District 2. That line indicates an intense failure from all of us here today. I have failed, and all voting residents of the city of Auburn have failed by electing an individual to the legislature who possesses an underdeveloped sense of social justice and respect for human dignity. I am calling for Mr. Andrew Dennison's resignation from the Cayuga County Legislature, and I invite you to join me in doing the same. His words and language have been unprofessional and unbecoming of the office. Many people came out today to discuss Andrew Dennison's words, but I would like to address my next statement to Michael Didio. You are next. The community is watching you in this moment. Everyone in the city saw how you conducted your campaign against Gwen, how you and your wife knocked on our doors and referred to her as that colored gal. Polite racism is sometimes hard to recognize in the moment, but your words stuck in my mind and made me and many of my neighbors extremely uncomfortable. A few brief words gave us a window into something we did not expect to see. That colored gal has a name. Her name is Gwen Weber McCoy. And if you do not learn from Andrew Dennison's mistake, she's going to be sitting in your seat.
Yes.
Thank you.
Line's up there.
I would like to call Melody Johnson.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Melody Smith Johnson. I reside at 2701 Van Buren Street, in the village of Weedsport. I came tonight to add my voice, and there are certainly those here who are more knowledgeable than me, who could probably speak more eloquently than I can. They can speak from a place of greater roots in this city, in this community, and this county. Yet, as a transplant from New York City, a property owner in Auburn, and a businesswoman in Cayuga County, a tax-paying, socially active, politically aware newbie to your town, I find myself standing here and asking for your ear. See, my mom and my God taught me that I'm to make good use of my time. So I respectfully ask for each of yours, both your ears, your heart, your authority, your mindset. I'd like to ask each of you two very simple questions. And I'd like to offer two very simple answers. In fact, I'd like to quote Mr. Dennison's amazingly racist, blatantly divisive, and dishonorable letter to the citizen. He asked, hell, most of these idiots don't even know anything about the statues they're tearing down. And should we try and erase the past or learn from it? I also ask you, where's our elected officials at all levels? Are they going to just stand by and watch our county be destroyed? He raised these questions. And in the spirit of the shed blood of my enslaved ancestors, and in the stolen breath of my murdered brothers and sisters in this country, I'd like to offer you these answers. One, you, the auspicious body of the legislature of Cayuga County have taken an oath. And by definition, it is your responsibility as an elected body that you're responsible for the public health and the public safety of those to whom have voted you in. You are also to provide efficient and effective, reliable resources to enhance the health and safety and the quality of lives in Cayuga County. How do you do that? When you are sitting, when you've locked arms and sat in chambers with a blatant racist. No doubt that's who he is. So I say to you and I demand the removal of him from every position that gives him the power to incite divisiveness, embolden hate, and to spew racism. Pull up and show up and vote right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to invite Mr. Elijah Hernandez to speak.
Good evening. My name is Eli Hernandez, and I am the president of the NAACP. I live on 9 4th Avenue, Auburn, New York. I could stand here today and talk to you about everything my brothers and sisters have come up and talked to you about already. But I'm not. I'm not going to call them a racist. I'm not going to say misguided. I'm not going to call Mr. Didio. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand here right now, and then I'm going to say to you what your colleagues are saying. Republican Assemblyman Gary Finch, first one to step up to the plate and say he should resign. We can do this without him. Number one. Number two, New York State Senator Rachel May stands up and says, we can do it without him. He should resign. 24th District Congressional candidate Dana Bolter responds. Candidate for the New York State Senate of 130th, Scott Comegis, tells him to resign. Roger Missel not only promises and tells us for him to resign, but says, I am willing and ready to take over because I live in the same district. But yet, today was when I first got information from the Democratic Caucus here denouncing his acts. Tim Lattimore, I've seen you so many times at the Freedom Fund backer for the NAACP. You talk about being in our Black homes, being in the kitchen. I expected you to stand up and say this is wrong. If anyone in here, I expected you. Still not too late. Dia Carvajal, candidate for the 126th District Assembly District, stepped up and responded. Joe Driscoll, Syracuse 5th District Councilor, responded. Joseph Holland, former Commissioner of Housing for Governor Pataki, responded today. Jimmy Giantino, City Councilor, Debbie McCormick, City Councilor, John Mannion, New York State Senate candidate, and now the Democratic Caucus. Where's the rest of you? The message that you have given our children is that you allow any elected official to say what they want to say and do what they want to do. Is that what you're going to stand for? You see, I'm a politician. Thank you. I sit on the school board. I get the politics. I get what we need to do. But when you have someone call Black folks idiots, call their own people that elected them
names, you can stop and I'll stop in a second. Then you have to take action, because I take action. I will take action as Eli Hernandez. I expect you to take action as who you are. I sent you all an email and I said, it's time for you to do two things. Stand up individually and stand up together as a legislature. We're still waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez.
I invite Mr. Joseph Leobrand.
Hi, I'm Joe Leobrand, 161 East Genesee Street, right here in Auburn. I'm on the Human Rights Commission for the city of Auburn. We hear complaints from many, many people all year long. And we deal with that with the police, businesses, you name it. Big gamut of complaints that we get. We try to mediate, and we do a lot of good work. I was a school board member for 6 years. So I'm not new to politics or anything related to the social makeup of this town. I have 2 Korean children. Luckily, they graduated from the high school and are now doing very well outside the area because they couldn't do anything in this town. I want to thank you for inviting me here tonight, Heidi. Each legislator swears an oath of office with the county judge administering the oath. I saw a picture of Mr. Dennison with his hand up with Judge Fandrich and Sue Dwyer. He did the oath of office. I received a copy of the oath of office from the Cayuga County Clerk's office today. He had to sign it. He must have had to go sign the oath book someplace too. So he swore an oath and signed his name to it. You have all sworn, every one of the legislators here has solemnly sworn to support the Constitution of the United States and also the New York State Constitution. The U.S. Constitution and New York Constitution is colorblind since the concept of race does not exist in either of them. Then there was the constitutional amendments for many more things and voting rights for everyone, including blacks and women. The 14th Amendment also gave equal rights protection under the laws for everybody. A county ethics board of this committee in this county and this legislature should review ethics violations of their own colleagues, as in the New York State Constitution. Removal or sanctions of an elected official could be done by the governor of New York State, who has that power. I was told you can't censure him, you can't ask him to resign, but Andrew Dennison could certainly be removed by the governor. I wrote to the governor 4 times now. I'm still waiting for a response to ask him to ask Mr. Dennison to be kicked out. I think there has been a legislator among our ranks named Andrew Dennison who has violated the U.S. and New York constitutions and ethics. I ask that you meet either in public, this legislative body, or in executive session and discuss and decide what to do with this Mr. Dennison, who has violated board ethics that you are elected to uphold. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leobrand.
I'd like to invite Mr. David Tobin.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm Dave Tobin, former resident and taxpayer of Cayuga County, and I'm deeply troubled by the toxic nature of Mr. Dennison's views. While this legislative body doesn't directly represent me at present, it reflects me, particularly in the centuries-old all-white membership. The spotlight is on you. What will you do? This moment of historic reckoning taking place in so many communities across the United States provides an opportunity for the Cayuga County Legislature, here in this chosen home and resting place of Harriet Tubman, to stand tall and lead. Your action would speak volumes. If you took strong action, it would speak volumes. You could lead in New York. You could set an example in the country by formally denouncing Mr. Dennison's statement and the centuries of cultural and institutional racism that it springs from. I encourage you as a legislative body to help change the course of this nation's history, which is happening now, all around us, to join the voices of millions of protesters around the world and to pass a resolution supporting Black Lives Matter. The statement would acknowledge the racist experience of Black people in these United States, which continues to this day. Such a statement would acknowledge the 400-year history of oppression that Blacks have endured on this continent, from slavery to lynchings, to church burnings, to church slaughter just 3 years ago, to economic and housing discrimination, to extrajudicial killings, to the cultivated fear of whites, and the overreaction of police. At this historic juncture, I hope your better angels inspire you to take a bold stance for the good of Cayuga County and these United States and pass a resolution stating that Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would now like to invite Dr. William Berry to speak.
My name is Bill Berry. I live at 77 South Street. At critical times, usually not expected, every community faces its watershed moment. This dilemma is not predicted nor planned, but its occurrence always defines and crystallizes what a community stands for, what a community believes in, what a community values, and how it articulates the human dignity for all members of that community. Cayuga County and this elected legislative body now have a watershed moment thrust upon you through the fault of one of your own members. As we approach the conflicting thinking of what July 4th means, particularly in time of health and racial pandemics, as elected officials, you need to understand, internalize, and fully embrace the contributions made by a race of people who look like me. You need to understand and be knowledgeable about the historical legacy of people who look like me. People who were systematically denied basic American rights. We are a people who were forced to contribute to the welfare, privilege, and protection of your ancestors, you and your family's pursuit of life, liberty, freedom, and happiness. Now, there's a member of this legislative body who has squandered and debased the liberating spirit of Juneteenth, as well as this Saturday's Independence Day. Legislators, you can change that profound negativity and send a strong signal to all residents what this body will not tolerate, condone, or embrace. Your silence, inaction, or less than forceful condemnation of your colleague will also send a strong signal to this community, especially people who look like me. Through the actions of one of your members, you are now mired in having to decide between ugly and derisive words by a colleague who publicly stated his archaic, racist ideas, or it is your duty to represent the best interests, hopes, aspirations of everyone who calls Cayuga County home. Do not get caught up in misrepresentations of free speech. Hateful words, whether spoken or put in writing by any Cayuga County legislature, has the explicit purpose to denigrate, demoralize, and demonize an entire segment of Cayuga County's residents. based on their race. That behavior cannot stand. Your colleague has now positioned this legislative body to take significant action and impose long-standing consequences. As an elected official, each of you are held to a higher standard. Your constituents accord you respect based on your position. Just remember, respect is not a one-way street. Conduct by your colleague that is undeniable hateful can never be legitimized or accepted by any other elected official who is privileged to sit in a seat in this chamber. Your colleague has embarrassed this body and now compels each of you to come to grips with how you want to see this county progress. Just know, a public or private apology is no longer enough. That pacifier has been rejected. Now, you must determine how you want to resolve your watershed moment. I trust you will not abandon what is best for your family, your neighbors, and embrace the expanding spirit of equity for all residents and the tenets of anti-racist behavior that is beginning to permeate every area of Cayuga County. This watershed is the moment for your profile and courage and commitment to the best interests of the entire community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I now invite Deborah Rose Berlotti to speak.
My name is Deborah Rose Berlotti. I live at 2009 West Genesee Street Road in Aurelius. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I sent, I'm going to read the letter that I sent to all of the legislators on Sunday. As a citizen of Cayuga County, I wanted to express to each of you my agreement with the Auburn Cayuga NAACP's condemnation of legislator Dennison's recent letter to the editor in the Citizen and join them in calling for his resignation. As his fellow legislators, I ask you to publicly condemn the racist and divisive views presented in the letter and do whatever is in your power as legislators to remove or censure legislator Dennison. At a time when our community and our country are trying to come together across the racial divide, when police and Black Lives Matter activists are marching together, including here in Cayuga County, when there is a groundswell of support across racial lines to dismantle the systemic racism that has continued to oppress people of color for 400 years. At such a time as this, legislator Dennison chooses to promote hatred and division. He displays a complete lack of understanding of ongoing systemic racism and our country's long history of racism. And his language and tone are not befitting of someone holding public office. As a community, we are trying to move forward, to heal divisions and to promote anti-racism and diversity initiatives. Legislator Dennison seeks to thwart these efforts, the very efforts he should be endorsing and supporting as an elected official. By holding such racist and uninformed views and flaunting them publicly, he is hurting rather than helping the people he is elected to serve. For love of the citizens and community you have sworn to serve, I ask you to please denounce legislator Dennison's remarks and do what is in your power to rectify the damage he has done. And I will just add, which I didn't have in my original letter, that if Mississippi can remove the Confederate flag, I think Cayuga County should be able to remove a racist legislator.
I invite Mr. Zach Ford to speak.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm Zach Ford. I come from Skinny Atlas, actually. And I had to come tonight and demand this guy's resignation because, ironically enough, the day before he published that racist letter, I had published a letter in the Auburn Citizen called an apology to Harriet Tubman's hometown. And as you may know, I'm running for mayor of Skaneateles next year. And in this letter that I wrote, I had apologized for a lot of the racist, homophobic, unconstitutional things that our officials there have been doing. So I just wanted to set the tone for all of you and come across County Line Road and stand with you all against racism, and in the hopes that you'll return the favor and come out to Skaneateles. Last year, the mayor of Skaneateles tried to have me arrested for speaking like this in a public meeting. So thank you for letting people speak, participate in government. I just want to be clear that I do demand this guy's resignation. One of you was, I believe the woman in the green was gracious enough to say it was, we make mistakes. This letter was not a mistake. Brushing your teeth and sipping some orange juice is a mistake. But writing a racist letter during the biggest civil rights movement in the history of the world and doubling down on it is not a mistake. It's racism. You guys really need to speak up. I know you are, but make sure you guys do everything you can to make sure this guy resigns.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
I would like to invite Mr. David Connolly to speak.
Hello, everybody. What I really want to do is talk to Mr. Dennison. I suppose I wish he were here, and maybe he'll hear this. I think that he and I have quite a bit in common. I was raised in a Republican family, and just before I got to college, I was a card-carrying member of the John Birch Society. I was certainly a racist tinge to my family. I was president of the Young Republicans in my college, my first couple of years, and I've had quite an experience going from there to where I am now. I think I'm probably older than you, Mr. Dennison, wherever you are, but maybe not by much. But I think I know something about where you're feeling, where you're coming from. Back about 91, I was the editor of the paper for about 8 years and didn't think of myself as racist. I worked very hard, I thought, to try to be unbiased about this. And at one point was opening the Citizen up to letters from racists, not because I agreed with them, but because, well, free speech. Mr. Dennison is subject to free speech. We ought to be appreciating that much of it. But it was actually Gwen Weber McLeod back there. She may not even remember this, but we were on a panel together when I was at the Citizen, and she nailed me. Basically, what she told me was the words hurt. And the reason nobody was responding to those racist letters was because they hurt too much. My idealism started to crumble. Equality circles, 5 years of this, and I began to hear actually what people of color were experiencing. What they're experiencing is rage. Mr. Dennison, your letter was angry, and I get that. I don't understand why it's angry. Cato is not a place where there's any likelihood that anything is going to happen, except maybe for the letters you're writing. There is I know that a person of color going up into Cato may have a concern. I have a friend, this is about 20 years ago, when cell phones were the size of a brick. And he told me that he would not ever go out into any place, into a rural area, without his brick, because he's a black man. That was surprising. Why? What does that mean? Well, he's afraid for his life. He's a minister. Very honorable guy. He's a minister. That's enough. That's all there is to know. I don't think, Mr. Dennison, that you understand what rage is about. The experience of people of color every day is different from the experience of you. I can go day after day, month after month, and get respect. Get people who treat me with human dignity every day. In fact, I can't remember the last time that I experienced anything but human dignity. You take human dignity away from a person, and what you get is rage. If you're not surprised by what is happening here and what's happening over the country, you just don't understand rage. Your letter had anger in it. Try to experience, try to understand rage.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings.
And finally, I would like to invite Gwen Weber McLeod to speak.
Since 1793, African Americans have contributed to the well-being and the richness of Cayuga County. The first African American woman to come to Cayuga County arrived here in 1793. Her name is Kate Freeman. We don't honor her, we don't talk about her. But if you learn her story, what you will learn is that once she was released from her indentured servitude, she became one of the finest citizens this community has ever known. She and her husband bought up lots of property in this area, and they became tax-paying citizens of Cayuga County. They created opportunity for generations of young Black Americans right here in Cayuga County to make a difference. And I'm standing here on her legacy today. My name is Gwen Weber McLeod, and I am the president and CEO of Gwen Inc., a Cayuga County resident, a Black taxpayer, both personally and I own a corporation in this community. I'm a former political candidate. I'm a wife, mother, and a grandmother. And as I reflect on this moment, it is no accident that I'm standing here before you this evening to make these remarks. You see, exactly 1 year ago, about this time, I was sitting right over there with then legislative candidate Tricia Kerr. We were observing a meeting, a formal meeting of the Cayuga County Legislature in a quest to better understand what our jobs would be like should we both be elected. The topic of that meeting, as presented by Legislator Foley, was whether or not the county should increase contact with minority organizations to improve diversity in the county workforce. As soon as County Legislator Foley made and offered up that resolution, I hear this, and I quote, "African Americans are a very small percentage of people in our county. Why should we invest our resources in giving those people jobs? If those people want the job, they should come to us and get them. And by the way, why would we do this? Just to pat ourselves on the back to say we hired a bunch of unqualified minorities." These words fell out of the mouth with ease in front of me and in front of some of you from a county legislator, his name, Andrew Dennison. To be honest, I was so shocked, I did not quite know what to do. So I sat and I observed. Immediately, a number of other legislators, some who were in this room, co-signed that comment. And there was an attaboy attitude in the room until a few legislators who were also in this room spoke up and offered alternatives to his blatantly racist comments. What struck me most was how comfortable a majority of the legislator was that evening. To be honest, there is not much more to know about Legislator Dennison. In fact, I'm not here to say a word to him. His own words speak volumes to me and my family. So here's my observation of his own words and actions. Based on his own words, letters to the editor, and recorded statements in the media, there is a track record of his opinion. And based on the documentation, Legislator Dennison is a blatantly racist. And I am equally of the opinion that everyone in political position in our county knows it. He seems to like being a racist. He benefits from his racism. He leverages his racism to achieve political outcomes for his party. We know Legislator Dennison is not going to change. He is consistent in this perspective. Just read his most recent article in The Citizen, an article written by Robert Harding, one of the most respected political reporters in New York State, for further confirmation. He doubles down with his racist commentary. Given this, I'm standing here tonight to press those around him to manage your racist colleague. And we need to press you. We need to impress upon you. If you don't deal with him directly, you are enabling his hate. This will be what I remember about him, and this will be what I remember about you. And I want to thank all of the politicians that Eli has listed who have come out publicly against his racism to date. And I want to thank us retiring Assemblyman Gary Finch for coming out boldly and decisively against a member of his own party. I know how risky that is for him. This was a brave, bold move by a politician who gets it. And this is what I need you to do. I expect you to do the right thing. And to me, you all must answer this fundamental question. How will we deal with a colleague and his internal and external supporters who use tax dollars, my Black tax dollars, to enact hate on Black citizens of Cayuga County? When legislator Dennison and other Cayuga County politicians, what you do or don't do about his racism will be the hallmark of your legacy of leadership in Cayuga County. Point blank, period. Do the right thing. My grandsons are counting on you. Little Najali, who's in this chamber right now, is counting on you. And what you do next really matters. Call for the resignation of legislator Dennison to resign. There are no accidents.
Chairman Coleman, my guest list is completed.
My name is on the list outside. I can look at later.
At this point, we're going to go to the phone. We have some folks that have been waiting very patiently. So this is our first time really doing this with the phone. So can you ask them to see their name and address?
Hello, can you please state your name and address? You have 3 minutes.
Hello?
Hello. Can you please state your name and address? You have 3 minutes to speak.
Ann Napper, and I live at 77 Ross Street in Auburn, New York.
Thank you.
Hello, can you please state your name and
She have YouTube on, if she's watching on YouTube.
Do you have YouTube on?
She can mute it.
Hello?
Hi,
I'm gonna mute it right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I can speak?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry, thanks. Yes, my name is Ann Napper. I was not born nor was I raised in Cayuga County. I've only been living in the area a little over 3 years. My career brought me to this county and to this community. And as a member of this community, I sometimes feel as an outsider looking in. However, I've met some and befriended some people in the area that have embraced me within this community. In reading the letter from Dennison, there was one sentence that struck me, which was the first sentence. If you hear a sentence that starts with the words, "I am not racist," but it is nearly always followed by some affirmation, which is quite bigoted, prejudiced, or racist. And it's hurtful to us African Americans living in this community. It's easy to cite the obvious racism, such as using race-based slurs or threats, but there's a more subtle and insidious form of racist stereotyping that can be hard to condemn. And these stereotypes often come in the form of microaggressions, brief, commonplace, verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities that communicate hostile, derogatory, and negative racial messages or assumptions to the receiver or to who's listening. That's what I received from the statement when I read it yesterday. It was derogatory, it was very hostile, and it delivered negative racial messages. 3 things that stood out: the word idiot, assuming we do not care about the violence that plagues our communities, and stating none of us were here 200, 300 years ago, being dismissive to who we are as Black individuals. So what do we want? What do we want? We want you to understand our experiences. We want you to take the time and the effort to see the world as we do. We want to be seen as a whole person and not stereotyped. And we want you to know how being a Black American can be both a source of pride and pain. And reading those words again was hurtful. It lacked sensitivity, and it just speaks to his ignorance, because the majority of that statement was based on opinions and falsehoods. There was zero facts in that statement. And I, as being a voice of a Black American in Cayuga County, will ask for his resignation to resign. And that is all I have.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else waiting? Is Brian? Okay.
Hello, you've reached the line for the legislative meeting. Can you please state your name and address?
Hello. Hello.
Hello, can you please state your name and address?
Yes, my name is Ronald Chipiniak, and my address is 11549 Ferris Road, Cato, New York.
Thank you, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. This may be something you do not want to hear, but everyone is entitled to their opinion. I have known Andrew Dennison for the better part of 30 years. During his past 4 years as a member of the Cayuga County Legislature, he has always brought a fresh perspective to the legislature with his insights, integrity, and conservative view. He is always questioning the way things are done, always looking out for the costs and how it will affect taxpayers in the end. Cayuga County residents would be hard-pressed to find a more dedicated, committed, and concerned legislator than Andrew Dennison. During the past 4 years, I have read many articles penned by Andrew Dennison, over 20 to be exact. His articles are meant to provide thought and discussion, as his letter on protest did. Would you agree with him at all times? No, and no one would expect you to. I personally know Andrew Dennison is not a hateful person, definitely not prejudiced or racist. Are we going to throw Andrew to the wolves over one misunderstood letter out of 22? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in queue? Oh, okay. So nobody right now. At this point, I'm going to call on Trish Kerr. She has some members to speak this evening.
I'd like to invite Carmela Barbagallo to come up and speak.
I'm Carmela Barbagallo, and I live at 113 North Coops Avenue in Auburn. And I was going to say that I agreed with all of the prior speakers until that phone call. And thank you, Tricia, for organizing for me to speak today. Mr. Dennison's words offended me so very much. The most offensive of his barely coherent thoughts was his statement that racism is a two-way street. In a time when our nation and community are hurting so much by the effects and outcomes of systemic racism, Mr. Dennison has chosen to further divide his constituents and fuel the fire, so to speak. He claims that he is not a racist. I would say at the very least, he does not possess the ability to understand issues faced by Black and other minority residents, and his correspondence with me this week via email proves that he has no interest in learning about these issues. I also forwarded that email to the legislature here and added some comments. If you're in a position of leadership in this county or in a company even, and haven't come to terms with your own intrinsic bias, and taken time to learn about what's going on in our nation when it comes to systemic racism, you're asleep at the wheel. I am a foster mother in this community and a mother to an African-American boy. And I feel that there are so many individuals living here that need true leadership. They need someone that's thoughtful, caring, understanding, and frankly, not a bigot. Someone to tackle community issues, not someone to write rambling letters that include hate speech or ranting that folks are idiots. If Mr. Dennison didn't intend those remarks for the residents of Cayuga County, why did he share these thoughts with our Cayuga County newspaper? He kind of alluded to that in his note to me, that he didn't intend it for the locals. I would think that this would be absolutely unacceptable to some of you sitting here in this room tonight, and that it would be considered conduct of unbecoming of a Cayuga County leader and representative. Throughout the last few months, I've had conversations with friends and family and discovered that we are all very much in a different place in navigating racial relations and have different viewpoints on the lack of equality faced by many Americans. The overall state of affairs has been very disheartening to me. That being said, Mr. Dennison is in a role of leadership. He should be much more involved. As I said to him directly via email, he does not represent my ideals. This type of hate speech fuels an already existing racism boiling underneath the surface. As we've seen occur in our nation, as racists feel emboldened, they take lives. We have children and adults to protect in our county. Not only should we be fighting for them to feel safe and protected where they live and pay taxes, we should be committing to help their lives flourish. Cayuga County leadership should take a look at the lack of diversity in public offices here and invest in diversifying Cayuga County. I hereby commit my time on a volunteer basis to do so. I hope to see each of you commit to evaluating your own understanding of the needs of all Cayuga County residents and making time in your schedule to create change and opportunity. We brag about this being history's hometown and cherish the accomplishments of Harriet Tubman, and I think that it is time to create advances in our community. You hear the calling here tonight. I ask each of you, how can you help? Will you start by denouncing the words and actions of Mr. Dennison? I'll wrap up. Lastly, I will say that if the topic of racism, social justice, and equality are intimidating to you, and if you don't know where to start to help out and create change, know that there are many, many residents here to guide you. I hope that you've attended a recent peaceful protest or the listening meeting that occurred downtown this past Saturday. If you think the majority of your constituents are white and aren't concerned with these issues, I challenge you to think again. Your involvement in these movements can actually encourage Cayuga County residents to become more involved. What a great thing that would be, don't you think? Thank you.
Thank you. No. Okay, let me go ahead. Karen Coos.
Hi, my name is Karen Foose. I live on 42 Morris Street in Auburn. I am a teacher for the Auburn district, and I am a parent of two biracial children. My daughter spoke this weekend about the experiences she had. This is totally off script. The experiences that she has had growing up in Auburn. And it's hurtful that at this time in our nation, that our children are still having to suffer from the effects of racism. And nothing that she has done except for being born into this town. So what my feeling was when I was reading Mr. Dennison's letter is that he is so much like so many of the people that I know, friends of mine who I've had to have these difficult conversations with. And the words that he was speaking shows that he's uneducated and uninformed about race issues in our community and in our nation. I was disgusted by the things that he said. As a leader of our community, no leader of our community should be speaking of in such a divisive tone.
What I had said in my letter to the legislators this week is all of our elected officials should serve and respect all of the citizens that they represent, all of them. They should stand on the side of justice to do the work to bring systematic change. When our nation is in a time of political and racial divisiveness, we should have representatives to represent our community to show that we are trying to bring unity, not divisiveness. Legislator Dennison chose to promote hate and disunity by a few of his statements. Black Lives Matter only when a Black person is killed by a white cop, by stating that racism is a two-way street, and mentioning Black on Black crime. It shows to me that he is not taking the time to learn about the race issues in America and in our community. Most importantly, we are serving our community, and he needs to be looking at our community and what he could do to bring unity. Sadly, Mr. Dennison's views are, he's not alone in them. And there is a lot of people in the community that feel this way. Like I said, I have conversations with my friends on a daily basis who say, I don't want to talk about race anymore. And I say, it's not an option to stop anymore. So this is city officials, these are teachers, these are nurses, these are people that are my friends that I am telling, you cannot stop the conversation. This is the time when the conversations need to start. Mr. Dennison needs to be listening. I'm not going to call him a racist. I'm going to say he's uneducated in the issues of race. And I ask all of you as leaders of our community to take a stand against racism. Mr. Dennison does not understand the Black Lives Matter movement. And I will reiterate what some of the other people have said, is that the silence of many of you is speaking volumes to us who believe that Black lives do matter, and we would like to see systematic change starting in our community.
Thank you.
I have a personal statement I'd like to read. I have had numerous calls and messages from friends, families, colleagues, and strangers who are now my friends, like Carmela, who have reached out to express sadness and outrage surrounding Legislator Dennison's editorial and follow-up commentary. I share their concerns. Continued failure by Legislator Dennison to acknowledge the impact of his words, regardless of his right to speak them, or to show any care for the pain and anger they have caused across our community, is unacceptable. It is possible to support law enforcement without devaluing the Black Lives Matter movement. These are not mutually exclusive. Legislator Dennison's words are reprehensible and have damaged progress made by the Cayuga County Sheriff's Office, Civil Service Commission, and Human Resources to build bridges and develop meaningful relationships with people of color in Cayuga County, and they are counterproductive to the county's overall growth and prosperity. We need a strong chair of judicial and public safety that understands the issues and the amazing and exciting social justice movement that's coming through our community and across our country. And I call on you, Chairwoman Haley McNabb Coleman, to remove Legislator Dennison from his position as chair of judicial.
Any other legislators here have public to be heard or would like to issue a statement of their own? Mr. Bettman?
Yeah, if I may, I'm gonna come up there because I want to take my mask off.
Sure. It is. While Mr. Bettman is making his way to the podium, I believe there are additional people who would like to come upstairs. What I have offered is 15 in the chambers, and if you wouldn't mind vacating some seats so we can maybe make room for more people to come in. I know some people have been in the hallways moving around, and if we could socially distance and keep this in a safe environment, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Sheila, maybe Brian could let people know to come back, to come up if there are more downstairs. Chris, I'm not sure those great people want to see. I'm sure it's just missed. I just didn't know.
So sorry.
I'm okay.
Okay, Mr. Bannon, go. Sure, go ahead.
So I appreciate all the words of people that have come out to speak today and those that remain to be heard. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for all the emails we've gotten, the phone calls, the texts. This is why we're in office, is to listen. You know, George Floyd gave his life, and a movement's been reinvigorated. Perhaps Mr. Dennison's actions can reaffirm our commitment to social justice in our community. And as Dr. Berry says, our watershed moment. So with that, I want to read a statement from a number of us as legislators. We, the undersigned members of the Cayuga County Legislature, do not and will not condone racism or bigotry in any, of any kind. Legislator Andrew Dennison's recent comments are destructive to the county, while being both unprofessional and reprehensible. We must acknowledge the pain and outrage caused by his recent letter to the editor of the Auburn Citizen. His words have further marginalized people of color and do not reflect the peaceful and powerful movement underway in our county to drive social change. Our citizens rightfully hold elected officials to a higher standard, as our words and actions not only reflect our own views, but have the potential to influence public policy and laws. This power comes with great responsibility and must be used sensibly and for the benefit of all the citizens we represent. To that end, we are working with local civil rights leaders on a series of measures to reflect long-term institutional change in Cayuga County government as we work toward a culture of greater diversity and inclusion. In his letter to the editor, Legislator Dennison asked us and other elected officials to take a stand, and we are. We choose to stand for inclusion, for communication, for unifying our community in our fight against hate and racism. And in doing so, we cannot stand for Mr. Dennison's words. While we cannot remove an elected official from office, this is the law, not a policy. We call upon Chair Aileen McNabb Coleman to remove Mr. Dennison from his position on the Chair of Judicial and Public Safety. We also call on Mr. Dennison to reflect on the impact of his continuing service on the Cayuga County Legislature and how that service no longer serves the common welfare of our county. With this statement and actions, we reaffirm our commitment as legislators to working toward meaningful change for people of color in Cayuga County. It's signed by Keith Batman, District 7, Elaine Daly, District 11, Brian Foley, District 15, Trish Kerr, District 12, Aileen McNabb Coleman, District 6, Heidi Nightingale, District 10, and Ben Vitale, District 3. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. Mr. Pinckney?
Yes, I'd like to read something on behalf of our caucus, please. Our minority caucus of Cayuga County Legislature.
I don't think there's anybody else down.
Condone the language used or the message conveyed by Andrew Dennison in this letter to the editor of the Citizen. At a time where our caucus, the county legislature as a whole, and all the Cayuga County public servants have been working hard to bring people together. This sort of action sets our community back significantly. Although every American is afforded the right to freedom of speech, it is also the right of the community to demand better from our elected officials, as our caucus does of our colleagues. We encourage Mr. Dennison and every elected official to be better and work harder to build the trust with our community. Minority Caucus.
Thank you, Mr. Finke. At this point, is there anyone present who wishes to speak during the public to be heard session? I did have Jilda Brower. Did you wish to approach? I have the separate list here. Did you?
I know, I'll cede my time. I think it's been well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, hearing none. At this point, we don't have any more calls. Okay. At this point, we're going to move on to the rest of our meeting. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We have all taken in your words and your messages in your presence. So I thank you for joining us tonight. And we're going to move on, and we are going to hire a new highway superintendent, hopefully, this evening. So thank you for coming. Okay. At this point, I want to take a break. I'm going to take a 10-minute recess. Let's hear. Get up and stretch.
Is there anybody who needs a hard copy of the applications that were made during this meeting? Where's that? Oh,
I'm so sweaty. Stay there for a second.
Hi, my name's Trish. We're from Spectrum News.
Oh, just call it out. Okay. So I mean, you look at it.
I'm sure we can go still live and then we'll just take it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come right on.
See ya. Home safe.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
Chris, are keeping this on and running? Go ahead and switch it over. Or do you want?
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna ask, I'll ask you, I don't anticipate that we're gonna take any formal action tonight, so we can announce on YouTube that, you know, we're gonna go into executive session, that no formal action will be taken after we come out, and then just turn off the screen, so we can go into executive session and stay there.
Yeah, there was 109. The same number. For the most part.
We'll have to check it, Brian.
I was just like.
Hard copy of our state.
Oh. Yep, thank you.
Well, I have it checked that out.
It's what?
Can I have it?
One more? Oh, you need to.
I was just gonna say.
So I was like, I haven't said anything to us. How can you say anything to us?
I didn't know I did. Thanks for coming out there.
That's crazy.
Well, to have copyright, the microphone is showing up. You want copyright?
Okay, we made it.
You guys want copy?
I get it here, believe me.
I can take my mask off.
Okay.
Do you know anything?
And, I didn't know this was.
Good. Harry, it was great. I'll get some. I'll go to his house. Tell him. Yeah. No, but I mean, 7 years ago.
Easy.
There's a lot of Democratic guys.
What do you think about
Do it at work. Like going to his job.
I just want to give you guys a heads up that it's still live.
Hey, guys, it's still live, just so you know.
Right.
Did somebody say something inappropriate?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, right.
What's your name?
Hi, Hans, how are you? I like your haircut.
What?
Your haircut.
Oh. I fell asleep in the barber's chair, you know? No.
Don't blame you.
I told him to cut the back real short. When I came to, you know, whatever it was, so.
It looks good.
At least I don't have to move it anymore.
Yeah, it looks good.
Very nice.
First time.
You don't look like.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me anymore, you know, so.
It's mixed.
I'll come running.
Yeah, I got a chicken on Friday with Dean Rivers.
How you been?
And,
You got it? Good. Well, I'd like to. I like to do that. Yeah. You do, do you just do it, do you have animals or do you do it? Yeah. Yeah, they're cross. I guess I'm a bad person. About this morning, I'd love to.
It's not about you, right?
Either the buffalo or the buffalo, you know, and you don't even have a barn, but you put a lot of money.
Oh, I just had the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I always say, I get it.
Go to his kids always wanted to do animals, and I'm like, very funny, on this farm, we got good fences.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you might know about all this sitting on my lap.
Walk around, now we can walk around, can't we, right?
When I get going.
It's too much. It does put some of the vacation. You know, I read your parents surviving in Antarctica with just a mask. It's like,
What are you doing?
It's like I got.
everybody okay now? Probably not.
It's at 9.
That's fine. In the group, so we know where the people.
You see the one poor guy got up with the, please sit,
Okay.
sign.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Oh, man.
We are still streaming live, so everybody's aware.
I told them.
Yeah, okay. She gave us the notes.
Gave my- Oh, Dave Coleman.
Yeah.
Are you coming in, Tom?
Am I? No.
You just have to get next to.
Oh, that was short and sweet.
I think,
Very good.
Rich is coming in tomorrow and Brittany is, because she has court. I think I'm gonna be working remote.
Oh, party. Yeah, for the party. I can't start it.
Dump them on your.
I won't stop.
No, thank you.
If they go to executive session, we're leaving. She's about to do anything when they come out.
No, I think she should, when she calls the meeting back to order, she should announce that on the video. So that way everybody who's, you know, and then we can just hit the end stream button and that'll.
Keep it, you're putting back in.
Sounds like a lawyer from Charleston.
Yeah, he's got the southern lawyer.
And I thought you were friends with Eli. Your stand worked very good.
Stand
was very good.
Yes, it did. How bad a job.
Painted a little bit darker when you know.
We need something a little less chippy though. I'm afraid that's gonna, I mean, just so skinny.
You want me to have Ed see if they can put a base on it?
Resources? Yeah. Very
You put like
bad.
a piece of plywood?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, whatever you can do to stabilize it.
Sorry. Okay, I'll come down to the meeting. Take care. Okay, got all three here.
Myself, Aileen, Andy, Paul did, Brian from the town highway superintendents, and Chris.
I still am. It's warm. No question.
Okay, fine. Where would you guys like this individual sit? Like right here? Or-
You can put them right here if you want, I'll be the
Oh, okay. Fine, go that way. I'll just put a seat going the other way.
Oh, good for you. I called him.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I have an old.
Yeah,
pretty much,
You can do it with a hair elastic if you have a kid that has one.
Yeah. Well, I just buttoned. I've lost a little bit of weight. So we were just talking about it. Well, congratulations. Story of my life.
I'm trying to be politically correct, okay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Tis the season.
I'm sorry.
Besides,
What's it say?
I know.
Synopsis.
So I'm gonna go downstairs and get our third candidate to our here.
You had the big boys now.
Give her the money.
Oh, okay.
And there's copies of the calendar.
Oh, okay. I'll put it up.
Where the candidate's gonna sit. My password got changed, so I did.
So full, where's the candidate? Yeah, here. Okay.
Put a chair there.
No, what? Okay.
Like rotate a little bit, I don't want to fit the stand.
No. You know how to do it. Somehow here. You guys can have your time, so you guys can close it. I'm making sure.
Pardon?
Still talking about it. I don't even know if maybe they want me to usually go there and,
Do you need to
call, give my money.
Yeah.
I never get your calls anymore now that I'm in.
What have you been doing? Oh my God. Yeah. And July.
Yeah.
It's a complex when I go home.
Chris, should I move that over? Should I move that over so he don't pump it, he or she?
Wait till he ends the stream, she'll need it for that.
Okay.
And once it's done, you can put it anywhere. You have the one on top, though, that. Yeah, you're right. Brought it to work.
So the charger's.
You got 6 Yeah, Joe. I got this beautiful. And it actually shows you like this didn't have I've been asked. Like the sealer over it that yours wasn't have. No, it was rubbing off on it. And I'm like, you gotta click it. It's not on. Correct. Right, yeah. You know, if I have it like this,
After she starts live streaming, I'll say that.
Oh, we're fine.
We just don't want to knock that over the top.
Oh, that's
Not
true.
not the stand, out.
Should I just?
I said, don't move it till after the stop light.
How are you doing that? Are you doing all three at once?
No, okay, no, but because we're so late,
Okay.
that's the reason why.
That whole area is great, I think. It's also 16. So
Can I sit back there?
use as much as you want. One here.
I'm gonna do that.
We didn't have. One, two, three, four. I would say we can have 6 people over there.
There's just me over here.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't know they were doing so.
You get any chocolate? You don't want some chocolate? What one will eat? Over there.
We can make it.
Yeah. I don't know what the line is, but I'm gonna prefer to just say people there.
Take your mask off. These ones, they get to like, a little pool of fibers start going up your nose. Something, my nose was like.
Is there water?
Or the Cayuga, I saw it to me, was a picture.
Did Chris tell you so that you just have to stay? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before I entertain a motion for executive session, I wanted to share with you that there will be no action following executive session. So at this point, we will, after we open ourselves up for executive session, we will end the live streaming at that point. We are entering into employment of a particular person, including interviews. So can I have a motion for executive session?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you so much.
Okay. Still works.